Yeah, we're live. Deal with some technical difficulties. What do we got going on? We got a wrong cam. This is appropriate for tonight because we're talking about wrong cams. We're actually talking about blower cams and turbo cams. And I get asked all the time, why would you recommend something different for those two things? You know, guys that have been here a lot know that I early on, for most of my life, most of my performance life, I was of the opinion that the best way to make a good forced induction motor is to make a good naturally aspirated motor. And that still holds true. I mean, if you take, when I was doing testing primarily back in the day when I first started with Westech on 5-liter Ford motors, if you wanted to add boost to it, turbo vortex supercharger like we have on this 462 valve photo that I have up for the thumbnail, those kinds of things, you can add a blower to the stock motor. You can add a turbo to the stock motor. You can do all that, and it still works. It's just that the boost stuff acts as a multiplier. So when we make naturally aspirated changes that add power, i.e. camshafts, ported heads, intake manifolds, when we do that, we get bigger dividends when we add the boost to the equation. So if we get 40 horsepower from doing naturally aspirated upgrades, 40 or 50 horsepower, that could be 75 or 100 horsepower, depending on how much boost we get. And so it's a better deal. Like I said, whatever we get, we do that as a multiplier when we're adding boost to it. So that's why I would usually recommend, and particularly early on the 5-liter Ford stuff, it had a lot of things it needed to change. We're spoiled with the LS stuff because really you just put a cam in it and then a turbo and away you go and everything works great. On an older 5-liter Ford, arguably even on the 462 valve Ford that I have the photo of, it doesn't have they're not great intake manifolds, they're not great cylinder heads, and they're factory camshafts, none of which are designed to make a ton of power. So unfortunately, your best bet is to change all of those things so that you can then improve the naturally aspirated power and then, make more boosted power. And we've come through this era where we had 5-liter Ford stuff with the HO upper and lower manifold and not good cylinder heads. And the cam was probably the best thing of those three things of the big three. Same thing with the tune port L98 style Chevy deals and LB9s. That we had the same thing. We had a tune port intake manifold, looked fabulous, very low RPM, good at making torque, not good at making horsepower. Stock cams, not great and not good cylinder heads. The small block Chevy cylinder heads were better than the small block Ford cylinder heads. But we've come through to a new era of performance where we have things like LS heads, LS3 head, or even an LT head now. Stuff that flows more than 300 CFM. It's got way more cylinder head than 99% of the people that utilize these heads. They're not going to make what that head has the possibility of making. Even a stock, they're really good. Even the low man on the totem pole is nearly a 500 horsepower head. Whereas if we look at a 5-liter Ford, it was a 300 horsepower head. So it's a big discrepancy in head flow from then and until now. Same thing with, Hemis are looking the same way, all of that stuff. A Coyote, obviously much better in the Ford arena. You can make a lot of power with Coyotes, naturally aspirated, and then under boost, you can make even more power. They have lots of stuff. They have good cylinder heads. They have good intake manifolds. They have enough camshaft where they're doing well. The camshaft is a big thing, not so much on the Coyote stuff, guys, mostly. And I don't think that this is because the Coyote cams are necessarily the greatest, because you can make a lot more power with a Coyote, with an aftermarket Coyote cam. It's just that you can also already make a lot of power with just adding boost to it. If we look at a typical 5.3 or 4.8 LS, it needs more camshaft. If you just put more camshaft in it, it makes a ton of power. But let's talk a little bit about the 462 valve, and then we'll relate that to blower and turbo camshafts. So why do I recommend usually a different camshaft for blower stuff? We could take a look at the centrifugal vortex as a good example. I'm not recommending a different camshaft because I think that the camshaft specifically is different for a centrifugal blower than it is for a turbo application. Now, as always, at the very top of the list here, in terms of power production and output and the kind of power that guys are building for pro mods and things like that, yes, you can. There are things that you can do with blowers and turbos with specific to cam timing where you could, let's say, optimize that power. That's not necessary to even discuss with cam timing that we're talking about for the other 99% of us. Typically guys that are running street or street strip kinds of things, because you can make all of the power that your turbo that you choose will make, or that your blower you choose will make. You make all the power that you make with that, with just some kind of off-the-shelf camshaft. But the reason that they would be different, and you could use the same cam, you could take our low buck truck camshaft, our $159 Ripper camshaft, or the Truck Plus camshaft, or BTR Truck Norse, or Chupacabra, or Hot Rod, or Red Hot. You could pick any of those cams, and you could run it with a turbo. You could also run it with a blower. But the reason that I oftentimes recommend a different cam is because usually the guy with a blower wants a different thing than he wants with a turbo. So to give you an example, if we look at this 462 valve thumbnail that I have up, if we look at that, we go, okay, a 462 valve. Could we run it with a stock cam? I did. I ran a Vortec with a stock cam. We know what it does. We ran it with other kinds of cams. We know what they did. They made more power naturally aspirated. Voila, not surprisingly, they made more power under boost, and and away you go. With the centrifugal blower, particularly, and to some extent with the positive displacement blowers, a lot of times guys want to adjust the power curve relative to a stock cam that would have been used in those motors. So for instance, if we look at a centrifugal blower, we might want to make power at a higher engine speed. Now the centrifugal blower is going to do that artificially anyway, because it has a rising boost curve and a rising level of efficiency. So because it has a climbing boost curve, now the motor that was making peak power at 5,000 might be making it at 5,500 or 6,000. This is especially the case if you shorten the intake runner length, we extend the RPM range, or if you change the cam timing. Now, if you change the cam timing and shorten the intake runner length, then we're talking about extending, making where the thing makes peak power. And hopefully it will also make more if you've made good choices there of those two things. And it will start making peak power, and you have a rising boost curve to go along with that now. Now it can take advantage of that. It's not that the camshaft that you pick is specific to a centrifugal supercharger. It's just that camshaft is bigger than stock. Instead of a 190 at 50 camshaft, it's a 210 or 220 or 230 camshaft that now wants to make peak or make power production another 2,000 RPM higher, let's say, than stock does, or at least 1,000 RPM higher. And now that you've done that, the added benefit with a centrifugal blower, or like I said, to some extent, a Kenny Bell, a Whipple, a TBS blower, is that you're also going to make more power up there, because on a centrifugal blower, for instance, you have a rising boost curve. So where before the motor may have been falling off at 5,500 RPM because you had a long runner intake, you had no cam timing, you have stock heads on it. Now that you've extended that out, at 5,500, maybe you're making 7 or 8 pounds. Well, at 6,000, you're making 10 or 12. And then at 6,500, you're going to be making 13 to 15 or something like that. And that's the thing, is that not only have you made the motor, more efficient, makes more power NA, and also wants to rev higher, now you've added more boost, because as you go up in engine speed, you're also going up in boost. So it's like a double benefit there. If you run, if you're running a turbo combination and you're running 6 pounds or whatever, and you're running it at a higher engine speed, you're still going to have 6 pounds as long as the wastegate is doing what it's doing. But on a centrifugal blower, you have a rising boost curve. We can artificially create that with a boost controller on a turbo application, but it's inherent in the design of a centrifugal blower. And also, I would argue, it's inherent in the design of most positive displacement blowers, as long as they're efficient and big enough to support the power level. Because the other thing that happens with the positive displacement blower, we don't normally associate this, we normally associate positive displacement blowers with like immediate boost and torque production and stuff. But the reality is that if you put a TBS blower on there or some kind of twin screw or whatever, they normally come with a short runner intake manifold, which does the thing that I was talking about earlier. It wants to make power at a higher engine speed than a long runner manifold does. We have the boost, we're adding boost, we're adding engine speed. And in a lot of cases, these positive displacement blowers, if they're sized correctly, will also have a rising boost curve. They'll not have a rising boost curve in the same way that a centrifugal does. But even if it's gaining, let's say it gains 1 pound or 2 pounds through this RPM range, that's still a positive. And if you have that and you have that short runner manifold and you have a slightly rising boost curve, good things are still going to happen at 6,500, more things that weren't happening at 5,500. So you still get a good thing. So you want to choose your camshaft. Again, what I would do is to start off with in my cam choices, I would take away the boost. Okay, now what do you want it to do? Okay, now what do you want the camshaft to do? Do we want to work with a stock converter? Do we want to have more power down low? Do we want to have more in the middle? Do we want to have more on top? And I know we want more everywhere, and we want to have good idle and get 50 miles per gallon and all that stuff, but it's not realistic. So where do you want to enhance the power curve? Now, are you going to make other changes? Are we going to do a shorter runner intake manifold like we talked about? And then you have to consider, are we doing a centrifugal blower where when I add more engine speed, I also add more boost and I also add more power. And so I'm going to be shifting at a higher engine speed. Is all that good? Is all that going to work out? There are a lot of things to consider when we're talking about camshafts. But understand and realize and remember that in this discussion, nothing came up about different valve events that are specific to a centrifugal blower or valve events that are only specific to a turbo or a positive displacement blower or any of that. I would pick the camshaft based on what I want the thing to do and which one of those things that I wanted it to work with, not specifically for events that are designed for a turbo or a blower. I'm thinking more effective RPM range, the other things that are going on. And I think that that's what's important on that particular Vortec. We ran a Vortec on a modified 462 valve. It worked fantastic. We ran it beyond 6,500 RPM. It's making really good power as long as you don't have belt slippage. And this thing made 700 horsepower, somewhere in that range. And it did very well. Again, you need enough blower to support that. And the other thing in this particular instance, the one that's in the thumbnail, is that we also had an air to water intercooler that we were starting to run out of intercooler potential for the power level that we were at. So we were once we get up to 650 horsepower, that core actually becomes a bit restrictive. So it's not an ideal choice for the higher levels. For putting that blower kit on a stock, 462 valve or whatever, even a slightly modified one, works good. But when we start doing that, again, another consideration for choosing your camshaft and choosing your engine combination. Also, you got to choose your blower, and in this case, also the intercooler. If we're going to put a T trim or a TI trim Vortec on there, we got to have enough intercooler to go with the potential of that blower if we're going to be trying to force that much air in there and make that much power. Let's see what you guys got going on a Saturday night. Another Saturday night, and I ain't got nobody. Every cam is a turbo cam. Every cam is a blower cam. Every cam is a cam. Earliest I've ever been. Yeah, what's up? Now we're working. I never understood blower versus NA cam or turbo cam. They... I don't know. I don't look at it that way. I know that I have seen some specific instances. In fact, I was talking to Brian Tooley today about a test that they did on that 400-inch LT base motor, the 8LT or whatever that is. And they were talking about running a big Pro Charger thing on there that they did and did testing. Because I was talking about some of the Plex data that I had questions on. And he was talking about when they were doing that testing on the dyno that with the Plex data, it actually helped them design camshafts that would be better because you could actually see some of the residual exhaust pressure making its way back up into the intake manifold. And so they're like, okay, well, we need to adjust that so that that doesn't happen. So we need to adjust the cam timing so that's not working. And it's not. I know guys are going to say, well, that's just overlap. It's not. It's not just overlap, because we had an in-depth conversation about that. And so hopefully we're going to be talking about some of that stuff. We're going to be doing an interview next week, and so we'll go over some of that. So make sure to bring your questions on what's going on there. But it's really interesting, and that sort of data also, that Plex data, also helps them design other camshafts. And so you want to look at not just maximum cylinder pressure or average cylinder pressure. There's a lot that goes on there, because just like everything, so sometimes you improve one thing and you don't improve the other thing, and the net gain is that there's no net gain. It's just the same. The power output's the same, but it can help you do various things and make power in different ranges. And particularly, he was saying with their VVT cams that you find out, hey, look, we can do this over here, and where we would have had to sacrifice over here, if we're advancing the cam or retarding the cam, we don't really have to do that as much. And now we can have this and this, which is, that's what testing is, man. That's what testing and data logging is, which makes it kind of awesome. And so it's the same thing with, the thing that people want, because we were talking about custom cams versus shelf cams and stuff, and we were laughing about that. And we're talking about, well, most of what people need can be serviced by available cams. It's not, this feel good thing that people need to have to think that, oh, my specific combination needs just one unique cam that does the thing that I want it to do. And that's just, we think that really just makes people feel better. Would you run a Okay, would you run a different cam with your Vortex blower than a turbo? So would you have different cams for those? Let me know what you guys think. Vortex in the house. A new 5-liter Ford, you just add the boost. Yep, yeah, we talked about that on the Coyote stuff, but they would make more power if you put cams in them and ported heads and different intake manifolds. I acquired an LS6 short block to replace my LS1. There you go. Phil and Tina, what's going on? Before long, there'll be 4 or 5 valves per cylinder heads, like the Europeans. I think that Chevy already has that, right? And had that back in the 80s and 90s. 3000 6500 cam. What kind of cam profiles do turbos really like compared to a supercharger cam profile? They like the same ones, or they like different ones. It's not what the turbo likes. It's not what the blower likes. It's what the owner of the engine likes. So it's a great topic for my case. I have a Vortex supercharger and I have a 408 stroker in a few weeks. Probably going to run 799 heads and a BTR hot rod cam. No, that'll be good. That'll be a good combination. And what blower are you going to run? A Speedmaster block, 351 Windsor. Okay. 9750 deck. You ever seen these blocks at 2000 horsepower? I have not run anything anywhere near that on one of those blocks. Do you have a video with the low buck truck overlaid with a truck plus? I searched for one, but not see a direct comparison. Yeah, go to richardholderperformance.com. We have the dyno graph should be there comparing the two. The truck plus is better above 5,000, but makes less below that. Well, up on my previous comment, also thinking of a torque type cam to make good low end power, because the centrifugal blower will still make more on the big end. Yeah, that's not an absolute thing, because if you have a camshaft that wants to make peak power, like I was talking about at 5,000 RPM, you can't extend that to 7 with the blower. That's not going to work. Extend it some, and also, again, based on the intake manifold and cylinder heads. Those factory GM blower cams are soft down low. I learned from you in part by the wide LSA. I voted down low buck truck or truck Norris for the win. Yeah, and again, if that's what you want, some guys don't want, maybe traction is an issue. Maybe they want the idle quality. Maybe GM did that for detonation concerns. Maybe they did it because the blower cam that they have in there, the factory LS9 camshaft, for instance, they wanted to make the camshaft more efficient up top where the roots blower typically is not. So there could be a lot of reasons for that. Summit Ghost Cam, 88 millimeter turbo. Okay. I was doing plugs on a 98 Cobra. Doing spark plugs is a lot better than doing, I like those because it just guides the thing down. Much better than trying to do valve springs on those. Is it true that some cams bleed off boost? That's possible to do that, but that sounds like you're going down the overkill or the overlap trail, and that's not a thing. The cams that have overlap don't bleed boost off, but it is possible, and more so with variable cam stuff. I've seen adjusting cams, for instance, on Coyotes, even just on stock cams. If you adjust the cams, you can bleed boost off, or I mean, it will show less boost, and on blower stuff too, and make less power, which normally we associate as boost goes down. As long as we're spinning the blower at the same speed, let's say, boost goes down, power goes up, but that's not what's happening. And so it is possible to do that. I'm definitely interested in cams from 98 Cobra. Yeah, the only ones I've ever run are the comp ones for the Cobra stuff. BTR 400 plus was too big. Yeah, I agree. I don't know what you're trying to do with an 88 millimeter turbo 441. I'm thinking you're trying to make lots and lots of power. It would seem like from that combination. So that bigger camshaft might be right in the wheelhouse with a big enough stall. And are you trying to make 1,500 horsepower, something that an 88 millimeter oftentimes is capable of? Caught something, by the way, a tire on my way home today. Split the corner of my sidewall. At least it made it home. That's good. I want to put electric supercharger and turbo on my L83. I will forge the bottom end, but what cam should I aim for and what compression ratio should I pick between a few of the diamond pistons? I don't know what you got to tell me what fuel, and I don't know what you mean by electric supercharger. I don't think that that's a thing, or it's not a readily available thing. Would you recommend twin GT35s or a single GT45 on an L92 with a stage 3 Texas cam? The cam has nothing to do with this choice. The choice between the two turbos would be a function of how much power do you want to make. So you got to tell me how much power you want to make, because the two GTX35 84s that we sell, the RS turbos, will do as much as 900 a piece. And so twins on those can make a lot of power. A single GT45 is like a 750 horsepower turbo on an L92. So you got a big range of power potential between the two. If you only want to make 600 horsepower, I would pick a different turbo now than a GT45. If you only want to make 600 or 700 horsepower, if you want to go over 1,000, that turbo is not going to get you there. So let me know what you want to do in terms of power output. Been working on my twin turbo 15 Silverado. Okay, that's an LT motor. The only thing I'm concerned about is running a cam that was designed for a positive displacement blower. It will only be run up to 6 PSI of boost. The cam that I would put in that is a BTR Truck Norris LT cam. Twin seem like a better choice for the street. Better than what? Just got, again, so for people listening out there, when you're asking a question about what turbo you should use or what camshaft you should use or cylinder head or intake manifold or whatever, or compression, The two things that are important, the two most important things I would argue, one, how much power do you want to make? That's going to dictate what turbo we would recommend. So how much power you want to make, and then what kind of fuel are you going to run? If you're going to run it on pump gas, I want 1,500 horsepower and I want it on pump gas. Those two things don't go together. you gotta have good fuel. I'm working on my third 462 valve build. I want to make sure I go to the drawing board and make the best of it. Undecided if turbo or centrifugal. I can tell you that a turbo will have, at the same boost level, a turbo will make more peak power and also have much more average power than a centrifugal will. I love the guys at Vortec, and I run Vortex on lots of stuff on my own 5-liter Mustang for years and years and years. Ran silver state after silver states with it, and it worked great. But if you look at an average power curve of a turbo combination, both at 10 pounds and a centrifugal at 10 pounds, there's a big difference in average power production. And also peak power, because you're not spinning the blower when you're spinning a turbo. I'd run a blower cam instead of a turbo cam. Ran nitrous with my blower cam before I put the blower on it. Again, nitrous doesn't care either. Again, if you're at the highest levels of stuff and you're running 6 nitrous kit, 6 stages or whatever, we could talk about something. But for a guy that puts 100 shot or even a 200 shot on something, you just put that kit on there. You just put that much nitrous in it and make sure your tune is right. You're taking away you're adding enough fuel and taking away enough timing to make that work. And then the camshaft that you run, along with the other things, is just going to dictate what your starting point is for power output. And then the nitrous is just adding to that. I'm just going to put bigger fuel injectors in my cord and spray nitrous on the temp sensor intake to increase the jet size. Okay, I've seen guys try to do that on mass air meters, but I don't know how much it's able to add based on temperature. It's not going to, the factory ECU is not going to probably recognize negative 129 degrees, I wouldn't think. Looking to add a turbo to my L5953. Currently has a TSP stage 2 high lift truck cam. Any recommendations? Everything else stock. Again, the conversation I just had, you got to tell me how much power you're trying to make. What's your take on 25% underdrive pulley on NA heads cam intake swap? Pull 5 or more horsepower, treble at idle. What motor are you talking about? Since it's Cougar, I would think you're talking about a small block Ford, right? I would be careful with underdrive pulleys, especially if you're doing it as a crank pulley, because then it affects the speed of all the other accessories. And you want to be concerned about water flow for stuff like that. I have a blower cam, my turbo setup, and make like 160 horsepower at the same PSI as a Vortec T trim on my I don't know what you're saying there. I have a blower cam and my turbo setup and make like 160 horsepower at the same PSI as the Vortec T trim on my Dart. So are you saying that you put a turbo on there and you have a blower cam in it, and that the turbo at the same boost is making 160 horsepower more than the Vortec did? Is that what you're saying? I'm thinking that might be it. Thinking about swapping a junkyard into my Isuzu pickup. That's a good idea. No production value garage has an interesting all-wheel drive Coyote Mustang project. Cool. 280 duration, 540 lift, 288. $112. A 280, 288. That must be an advertised duration number. That doesn't seem like a blower cam to me. Summit Racing, they say turbo cams reduce overlap with less exhaust duration split in relation to the intake. Can you explain this? Well, anybody that tells you that they're trying to get rid of overlap for a turbo cam doesn't understand how camshafts work. Because our low buck truck camshaft has overlap. And we've run it many, many times with turbos. Overlap is not the enemy of turbos. That's not a reality. A guy who has actually tested stuff, run it NA and then run it turbocharged, which a lot of guys don't do. Even cam manufacturers don't do that. And that's why you see also on turbo cams, sometimes single pattern and sometimes reverse split cams, which I think is a terrible idea. What's the most power you've ever made on a VS Racing 7875? I don't know. I've never tried to make the most power. I think we've run a 7875 Gen 2 or Gen 2.5, the one that I have, up at 900 or 950, I think. I don't think that that's all of it, but I think that that's as high as we've run it. I ordered your GTX 3584 RS dual ball bearing turbo the other day. That's the last piece of my build. Do you know when they're getting shipped out? I'd have to ask Jimmy. I think that they should arrive pretty quickly here. And there's 1 or 2 of those maybe left. So if you want a dual ball bearing version of that, get your order in. Otherwise, you're not going to get one. Made 823 on 7875 Gen 2.5 and still can change backside. So I think 900 is possible. I want to do 275 horsepower all motor K in my 97 Civic and then spray it with a 200 shot and then all-wheel drive. Okay, that'll be good. 275 is really easy to do. That's not hard from a VTEC 2.4 K series. Have you heard about compressor supercharging? Yeah, I was at Westech when they tested it long ago. Looking to make 600 to 700 horsepower, crank horsepower on L59. Yeah, that's just a cam and springs and boost. That's it. It's easy. Get a low buck truck cams and spring kit, put big enough injectors in it, put a turbo on there, and you're good. You can do that with one of our GTX 3584 RS turbos. I got a K24 5-speed Accord. If turbos were the best, Top Fuel would use them. No, that's incorrect. The turbos are outlawed in Top Fuel. You cannot use them. A turbo makes more power than a blower. It takes 1,000 horsepower or so just to spin the blower in a Top Fuel car. If you add turbos, it doesn't take that to spin them. But for a Top Fuel application specifically, making power isn't their issue. They don't need to make more power. What they need to do is be able to put all of the power that they have down, because they can't even, and they do this with locking up the clutches, they can't even put the 10,000 or 12,000, whatever horsepower that they're making. They can't put all of that down until the very end of the run. They're not putting all of that power down. They're just slipping the clutch basically for most of the run. Small block Ford, Speedmaster block any good, or should you just spend the extra cash on a dart? If you're trying to make 2,000 horsepower or whatever, I would get a dart block. I've never tried to do that on a Speedmaster run. Pop the hood, you see a 4-cylinder with nitrous and not expect a 10-second car. A 10-second car would be good if that's what you're trying to do. That's hard to do with that combination that you were talking about, though. Make some ECU tinkering progress. Functional Arduino code for 224X and cam signal generator. Tested it with my new $100 oscilloscope. Capable of making 10,000 RPM signal. That's a lot of signal. If superchargers were the best, Formula One would use them. Yeah. Video to my car on the dyno making 823 wheel horsepower. Yeah, that's about where we were flywheel. We were low to mid 9s. You can order a Cosworth for the Civic. The kind of power that you're talking about, so guys are making 400 flywheel with a naturally aspirated one. They're probably doing that on nitromethane, but 76. We don't have 76 likes. We only got 35. We're only halfway there. We're only part way there. How's your poll doing? Would you run a different cam with your Vortec blower than a turbo? 52% saying no, 48% saying yes. Do I really need to run a restrictor plate on my turbo? Ball bearing LS running 55 PSI. A lot of times the turbo has a restrictor in it, or the adapter that you put in has a restrictor. $100,000, that's a lot. What's your best quarter mile? I'm not a drag racer. I'm a road racer and a Bonneville racer. So I don't do that. That's like asking somebody how many home runs have you hit when they play football? I'd like a Cosworth just because I like the way that they look. Like I want a Cosworth Sierra or an Escort. I like those. I like those a lot better than I like the 2-valve Pinto motor. I like the Mercure XR4 TIs, but like a Cosworth, a 4-valve version of that would be cool. And I like the Cosworth ones because they have good eyeball appeal, like the twin cam motors. Like the Toyotas are like that. The 4AGs are good. What size wastegate and blow off valve do you run on the test setup? The ones that I run on the LS stuff, those are twin 45 millimeter hypergates from TurboSmart. And then we have a big, I don't know if it's a 60 millimeter blow off valve. It's just I'm not recommending that or saying that that's what's needed. It's just that's what we have welded onto the tubing that we normally run. And the wastegate provisions are, that Y pipe is set up for those two wastegates. So it gives us good control. Do you still have your Camaro? If you're talking to me, I don't know. My first car was a split bumper Camaro. I don't have that. That was long ago. I do still have, I'm an original owner of my 5-liter Mustang, though. I also just learned the double wrapping my crossover pipe and down pipe was worth 15 horsepower. I don't know how that's possible. 99 Explorer, 5-liter, Lightning M112, stock pulleys, thinking at 274. Okay, all that's good. I would think about maybe better cylinder heads, but the Explorer, the GT40s are better than stock ones. Maybe a little cleaning up. If I was running iron heads and the motor was apart, I'd at least polish the chambers, maybe. Building Cosworth YBs, engine stand in the living room with Curry beer. There you go. My 67 Camaro was my first car and I still have it. That's good. That is good. Yeah, I would like to have a split bumper car. I really like those. Although I'm leaning more toward a Chevelle 73 Camaro. Yeah, mine was a 70.5. But same kind of body style. Cosworth engine squeeze out extra horsepower per cubic inch. Yeah, having a 4-valve motor is way better than having the 2-valve Pinto motor. I know the Esslinger guys make lots of power from them, and Roush did that too. But a 4-valve one is just, just so much better. I owned a 69 Camaro since the late 80s. That's good. Have you seen any difference in header collectors with cones and without on turbo setup? Any difference between them? I haven't tested a cone on a turbo thing. We did the test on the log style manifold versus the header, and the log style was much more responsive. I would suspect that if we were trying to max the power output of a good sized turbo, that the header would come into play there, because I'm sure it flows more than the log style does. But I don't know specifically about the end of the header, about coning them. I can tell you that coming out of the turbo definitely helps. I'd like a cam with more top end on a centrifugal. How long are you under 4,000? If you're hard on it, yeah. And that's the other thing is that even with a centrifugal, it still comes down to like where you want your power, where you spend most of your time. I mean, I drove around with my Mustang, my 5-liter Mustang had a Vortec on it for 85,000 miles essentially. And for many, many years, I had that on there. And actually, in looking back, I even though I was all about top speed back then, I think I would have liked having a one step smaller camshaft. Like a cam with more top end. I'd like a 67 Camaro. Yeah, those are nice. My brother, his first car was a 67 Firebird. For some reason, it costs so much more to hot rod these days. Yeah, I see the cars that come into Westec, and admittedly, a lot of those are, they're $300,000-$400,000 cars. I'm thinking, that's just a ridiculous amount of money to have something for that. 89 IROC, my first car in the late 2000s. It'd be nice to do some dyno runs with carbs, throttle bodies with the Gadget Man groove modification. I don't know what that is. I'm testing my new turbo setup tomorrow. Best with Vortec was 660 wheel horsepower and 970s. Now car makes 823, so we'll see how it goes. That should be a lot faster. Are you going to have trouble putting the extra power down? My F2 and my Camaro would hit 18 pounds in 0.4 of a second. A centrifugal still has a rising boost curve. It doesn't matter. And if you're doing that because it has a big stall or something like that. It's some kind of drag race thing. Do you know if the CVT transmission can be modified and put out performance and not burn up because it's not Honda future for 2022 and Up Civics have no future? I don't know about modifying the CVT trans. Do you consider dry shots of nitrous dangerous for an engine? Why would a dry shot be any different than a wet shot? Actually, the way to run bigger shots on some of these manifolds, like an LS manifold that has trouble having distribution and having fuel flow through it, if you just flow the nitrous through it and add the fuel through the injectors, you're more than likely going to get a better fuel distribution for that, because the gaseous nitrous has less trouble, I think, finding itself to go evenly into all the cylinders. And then if you're injecting the fuel evenly into all the cylinders, better things should happen. And you're also not displacing as much airflow going through the manifold that way. The Gadget Man groove mod turns your tailpipe into smelling like a dryer vent, and all the fuel you don't smell turns into power. Yeah, I don't understand that. Hot rodding options were always tied to my weekly paycheck as an apprentice. Most important component on a car for quicker runs is the guy behind the wheel. I would agree with that. I watch let me know if you guys watch this. I watch a thing called Car Wow. Do you guys watch that? Where those guys get out there and drag race all kinds of different cars together, and bikes and supercars and the Teslas and the Sperling and Turbo Hayabusas and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was talking to Jimmy about this today. It's really interesting to see what the limitation is for acceleration, and it's being able to put the power down. I mean, if you have some of these supercars that are 1,000 horsepower, them trying to put power down, and even like the Turbo Hayabusa, it was 300 or 400 horsepower or something for a Turbo Hayabusa, and they're running in the quarter mile, and he just couldn't. Anytime he would go to put power down and have boost, it'd just spin the back wheel. And so the limitation in these drag races is awesome to watch, because you get a car that's hooks up like a Tesla Plaid is really, really hard to beat. But to get the acceleration, some of these things, and you see some jump out and then you see some kind of run them down. And it's interesting to see. I mean, I like all of these supercars. It's interesting to see them, how well they do. And and I'm not a huge Porsche fan, but it seems like whatever kind of, they always do well for their relative power output, it seems like. On the basically stock 5-liter or 5.3 with flat top pistons, what is a perfect size cam without affecting your low speed power, giving you the best of both worlds? I'm assuming your low buck truck camshaft would be number one. That's the one that I would recommend. I mean, I think that you could make a camshaft that has better power maybe at 2,000, but it would not have anywhere near the power that has at 5,000, let's say. A journal bearing turbo, do you have to restrict oil line, or is it a straight -4? I think we ran straight -4s to ours. Car Wow is great. Yeah, I like watching the drag race stuff. And then I like watching one of the things I like that they do is when they drag race cars and one car has more power and it can't put the power down, then they do a roll test. So they roll up to the starting line at 40, 50 miles an hour and then go. And then you see the horsepower thing go, oh, yeah, look, it's just kind of pulling away. But from a dead stop, and I don't know how many people are racing supercars from a dead stop. Anyways, I don't know if you're pulling up to a stoplight in your Koenigsegg or whatever, or your McLaren, and racing against the guy in the Ferrari, whatever. I don't know if that's really happening, but have you ever tried Salmender Sing grooves like they use at Almeida Racing? I don't know what that is. I love seeing the comparison and how traction or driver mods can sometimes make all the difference. Yeah, having traction, it's like the all-wheel drive stuff. It's a big deal. If I put Gen 4 rods in my Gen 3, do I need to rebalance it? Yes. If you want to run full exhaust on a twin turbo setup, should an X-pipe still be beneficial or scavenging? No, there's no scavenging on the X-pipe because that scavenging wave can't make it back up to the exhaust through the turbo. It might sound good, but I don't think the X-pipe is going to do anything but change the exhaust note. If you have a centrifugal blower and it likes high RPM but has low end torque deficiency, should you do a longer intake runner to band-aid it? You can if you want. Most of the factory things that you would be putting a centrifugal blower on already has a long runner intake. But if you put a long runner intake and replace a short runner intake at some RPM, you're going to have a trade-off. You're going to gain more power down low and lose power up top. The KC Max Black Firebird is running compressor supercharging. You got 2,000 horsepower on 427. Yeah, I'm familiar with compressor supercharging. Like I said, I was there when they ran the first one on the dyno at West Tech, and I've seen the car that they were running way back in the day. They had a Camaro that they were running. They did a bunch of stuff at the drag strip with it, and it makes a lot of power because you're outsourcing how you make the boost, and so it's just free boost, and it's really, really, really cold too. The brake tests are interesting. Yeah, stopping is always really good because that's important. What's your experience with Comp Cam's low shock technology? I've run a couple of their cams. That's as much testing as I've done. Salmander Singh was a motorcycle racer in India. He discovered a way to run higher compression, lower temperatures, and eliminate detonation by putting a series of hand-filed grooves in the quench pad. I'm sure that's probably what you mean. So is he essentially like softening chambers? Softening chambers definitely works. We know that works. I haven't seen the grooves, but maybe they're doing a similar thing. Brian Tooley and I have wanted to do chamber softening for tests on it for a really, really long time. He's employed it on the stuff that they've raced, and it definitely works because it definitely changed the amount of timing that they could run on a class specific turbo thing that they were running. And so it definitely helped. A couple cams. What's the couple cams? Richard, love your 462 valve testing. Been watching and rewatching the content for years. I think I have more 4.6 stuff that I have not put up. I need to put all of it up. Opinion on modified Holley with larger base plate, like a combo carb, good part throttle with larger base plate for wide open performance. I put an 850 base plate on 750. Holley did that. Their first 950 was that. And you can try that, but I think making them both bigger is probably the answer if you want more power. I don't think you're going to get a best of both worlds kind of scenario by doing that. Trick Flow Gen X 265, good head for an LS7, stainless steel valves, 107 grams. Yeah, I don't know about the RPM potential of that stainless steel valve versus a tie valve. It's obviously the spring rate's going to be required. I don't remember testing those heads. I'd have to look back at the LS7 head test that I did to see if those were part of it. I don't think that they were. What's a cheapish way to tune an LS? I don't know that there is one. I mean, HP tuners or LS1 edit or all of those things that you can use. It's not cheap. And the standalone obviously is not cheap either, but I think that those other tuners are more affordable. What if I want a cam? Should that be cam instead of X? Is the X near the C? Yeah. If you want to just sound cool, you can get that. You can get one that has the chop on it. Can you compound a centrifugal supercharger and small turbo to get the torque up on the low end? But why, if you want torque down low, why would you choose a centrifugal supercharger? That would be a terrible way to go. The better way to go is a positive displacement for the low end and then a turbo. A turbo really is going to almost do that anyway, but you only test a couple of comp cams. Oh yeah, a couple of the low. I've only tested a couple of the low shock technology cams. I don't think I've tested a whole bunch of those, but I have tested a lot of comp cams. It's worth paying $1,200 for port and polish stock heads, and is the power gain worth it also? Yes, I'm a bit, well, yes, a ported set of stock heads will do almost what a aftermarket CNC head does. Sometimes they do as much or better. That isn't the question. The question is, it's your money. Is that a good deal for you? And also, I would ask, do you have the rest of the combination to take advantage of what porting the head does? So if you've got a 5.3 with a Truck Norris cam or a low buck truck camshaft or Chupacabra, I don't think I'd put ported heads on it, because you're just not going to get what you could out of that, because the cam is a fairly mild cam. I mean, it makes good power. It's 400 to 425 or whatever, somewhere in that range. But the heads are not going to take you to 500. You need a big cam, and you need ported heads, and you also need a good intake manifold to take advantage of heads that flow 300 CFM. So do you have the rest of the motor to take advantage of that? 370 LS, forged rods and pistons, LS3 heads, high ram, 231 cam. Is a blower cam, do you think, is a good cam for a twin turbo setup? Yes, that cam will work with a turbo setup. It will work fine. It's not the cam that I would pick for a turbo setup. I would pick a smaller camshaft, because I would want more response rate from the turbos, and the turbos will dictate the power output. So if you want to make 1,000 horsepower and you got 1,000 horsepower turbo, or two 500 horsepower turbos, whatever you're doing, how much ever power you want to make. Again, that's the first thing you should tell me. How much power do you want to make? And then what kind of fuel you're running. And then I would put a smaller cam in if it were me, but that will work. Is there any real gain in low speed pulling a trailer powered by a 5.3? heads on a 6-liter? If so, how much do you think by just having the better port velocity and smaller combustion chamber? Well, you can take a look at the video that I have up where we compared the stock heads to a set of 317 heads, which you have on your 6-liter. And they're worth 20 horsepower and 20 foot-pounds of torque. So if you think that that's beneficial, then yes, it is. Have you seen the YouTuber Boosted Boy's new 2-motor Prelude? I haven't seen that. I haven't seen the new one. I have a Yukon XL LS1 bore, truck Norris, tie bar lifters, limit stall converter, forged pistons, rods, new crankshaft. Intend to have fun with a dry nitrous 300 shot. You're going to run a 300 shot on how much power is the motor making? I found your channel a couple of weeks ago, watched all the LS videos, and I've learned a lot. Welcome. What do you think of any of the Phytech stuff? I've never tried any of it. I have a retro 4-barrel style. I'm not sure if I regret the purchase yet. No idea, Andrew. I've never tested it. Vortex are awesome. Mine had the stock clutch and the car doubled its power. Literally bolted thing on the side of the engine. 85 fuel. Was planning to purchase the Promax heads. You think it'll make 350? You think it'll make 350 at the wheel and you're going to add a 300 shot to it? That seems like a lot. I would start out much lower than that. We've run 300 shots on junkyard LS motors. The junkyard LS motor probably made about what that is. That it made for mid 400s, I think. It was a carbureted one with a good sized camshaft in it. And we ran 300 shots, but we didn't care about breaking the motor, which we eventually did. That's when I was doing a shootout with Kamikaze Chris from Street Outlaws. And we had 2 motors on the dyno and we were running nitrous. And we basically ran to the limit of the plate setups, which is about 300 horsepower. And I don't recommend that. I would probably want more motor than that to do that. After my exam, I'll be able to put my K-frame in for the last time and then start preparing the engine bay. Cool. Yeah, I wouldn't ever start out with, you never set a nitrous setup on kill like right off the bat. That doesn't make sense. I would, my first thing would be 100 shot. I would try that and see where that is. And then step up slowly because you're much better to do that. That way you get more runs on it. If you put a 300 in it and just go nail it and something's wrong, you don't have enough fuel flow, you don't have enough octane, you haven't taken the timing out, whatever, and it blows up, you're like, okay, that was not even one run. But if you go out and you go through 15 bottles like I did with my Mustang at like 100 shot, you go out and just have fun. It's awesome. And then add another 50, 150. Oh, 150 feels a little bit better. 200, that's a lot. How long do you think a stock bottom end Gen 453 would last 1,000 horsepower on the street? A really, really long time. Because how often are you ever going to put down 1,000 horsepower on the street? Almost never. You're honestly on a turbo 5.3 like that, you're not going to be running it at 1,000 horsepower. You're going to be running it at 600 probably. And then 1,000 whenever you think that you can put that kind of power down. My 2011 4x4 Suburban put down 283 wheel horsepower. Low lift Texas Speed truck cam 5.3. Refurbished to 799 heads. Pretty stout. Yeah, it's not a manual trans, right? It's an automatic trans. Yeah, 283 seems like a lot. That's a 6-liter, I'm assuming. I think I'll keep it black, but shoot a layer of sparkles. All right. Some sparkly. We're going to close out our poll at 53% saying no, they're not running a different cam. Yeah, 1,000 horsepower is not something that, you can't be laying into 1,000 horsepower and be in it for any length of time on the street. So it's not something you could do. I mean, even 1,000 horsepower in a Fox or a Camaro or whatever, even on the freeway, even a roll race on the freeway is going to be, traction is going to be very, very limited on any kind of street tire, to say nothing of the kind of speed that you would be going. That would be problematic. What intake temp do you start to think about running water methanol injection? I normally don't. I put intercooling on it over water meth injection. Water meth injection, in my opinion, is difficult, like with LSs and a lot of EFI things. It's hard to get the thing to distribute evenly to all the runners. And so if you don't have it go to one of the runners or less go to one of the runners, it's just not helpful. What's the best camshaft for power and sound? The one, whatever one you pick. The sound of a cam is wholly subjective. Some people like stock ones. Some people like a little bit of chop. Some people like medium chop, 3/4 chop, all the chop. I don't ever remember driving anything that had 1,000 horsepower on the street. I can't remember. I can remember being in stuff that was like 700, I think, 650 to 700. It was a Turbo Fox, and it even had good tires on it, but it was because it had slicks on it at the time, and even that was like, it was a handful. Chad's 400 in the wagon it made 1,000 horsepower on the engine dyno, but when I rode in it, he was driving. I don't think that it was at. I think it was probably at 700 or 800 when I rode in it. For the 378, I want to run two VS Racing 66, 67 T4s using E85. My plan is to run 850 to 900 at the tire. Okay. 267, 66, 67s will be more than enough to do that. What will a Gen 6 with 5.3 heads in a Stage 3 truck cam make? I don't know. Mid 4s, I'm thinking. Can they make a good 3,500 stall speed for a 4L60 that has lockup? I don't know about the lockup part. You could have to contact one of the Circle D or one of the trans guys, one of the converter guys. Any tricks for finding boost leaks? You can use the smoke machines. Windex or soapy water on couplers or any small leaks. Small leaks are not going to matter much. Even having a like 8th pipe or whatever, we've taken those out and it's not really very much. You could see the video that I did on the bubbler. Somebody, one of the guys here asked me to do it because we were running the blower, and one of the things that they were doing on these M90s is that it basically has a leak that I think allows the PCV to come out or something like that. And so one of the tricks was getting rid of that. So I said, yeah, we'll put a leak in there that size. And it definitely dropped boost. It definitely dropped power, but that's a pretty big hole though. Your work will live in infamy. You've answered so many questions. I'm just happy that guys come and have questions and then we can answer them. My wife watches gossip shows. Rico, what's going on? My car has 1,300. It's only 61 degrees this afternoon. It would only take 50% TPS to spin in second and 67% in drive. It's on a slick with 350 gears. Road was too cold. Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to, it's got to be, to put all of that down, you have to have, you got to have traction. Got to have the T-raction. Otherwise, it's just Spin City. What will a small block 355 Chevy with forged bottom end make with an F1X on pump gas controlled by Holley? I don't have any idea. I don't know what the Chevy combination is. I don't know how much boost you're running. I don't know how much the limitation of pump gas is relative to the boost that you're trying to run. What budget turbo brand can you recommend? Thinking about a twin turbo kit for a 5.3 and a Camaro. I don't know of anybody that's going to make a kit for that, for a Camaro chassis. And what size blow through carb do you think I'll need? The one that we run's an 850 from CSU. I like it. It works good. It's got boost reference power valves. It's adjustable. It's, usually we can dial it in pretty well. I never tried to dial it in for driving around, but Kevin swears that you can do that. If you want good twin turbos, let me know how much power you're trying to make. But the twin 3584s that we have, and I think that we're thinking about getting twin 3076s also, because it would be smaller and more responsive for guys wanting sub 1,000 horsepower twin kits. Is the 425 Nailhead a good platform to make 500 horsepower? I don't know. I've never run one, and honestly, I don't remember this whole time, multiple decades that I've been going to West Tech, I don't remember seeing a Nailhead run there. I would suspect that the head flow is probably not great on that. It does have displacement, so it doesn't have to make a whole bunch of power per cubic inch, but I just don't know if it has the airflow to do that. What advice would you have for someone getting into YouTube and creating content? You should do the things that you know about. So you should be good at something. You got to be good at something, and just be you. Don't try to be anybody else. Don't try to imitate somebody. Don't do any of that. Just be you. Because the one thing that YouTube, and this is the information that's always been given to me, advice when I was starting, is that the one thing that YouTube doesn't have right now is you. So be you and go do that. And then do stuff that's interesting. Find a good market. I don't care if it's this calming music, which I think I want to do now after being up at Yosemite. But put together videos with calming music. That's fine. I like snakes. I know a lot about snakes or sharks. I know a lot about that stuff. And so do the things that you know about, and then just do, don't try to just do things for money. That's not going to work out. What is a 78, 75, 78 turbo you have power rating? The turbos that we have available at richardholdnerperformance.com, we have two of them right now. We have a GTX 3584 RS, which is, we've made more than 800 with it. It's rated at 900, but I think that probably be more than likely on a small displacement 4-valve motor. The G42 turbo that we have is 1200. Do you think I should port a 425? If you want to make more power, porting the head is definitely an option. I don't know that there are aftermarket Nailhead heads available. I meant to ask, having the dyno tube done, they will likely know when is enough nitrous the build can handle. I won't finish until and learn to tune until September. The people that are dyno testing your motor are not going to know that. You're the one that decides that. Unless they're really conscientious and make pulls and verify everything, verify that you have the right, fuel pressure and temperature and all that. And then the timing is pulled away and they have that data logged, and then they take the plugs out and look at the straps. Unless they're really doing that, which very few tuner places do, they don't know that. They're not going to know that unless they know a lot about motors. So the amount of nitrous that you can run, the best way to do it, the way that I do it, is as a function of the naturally aspirated power output. About 50% of whatever that motor makes NA is an area to start being concerned about. Dart 215 heads, Eagle rotating assembly, super comp headers, for a G-body Martin Smallwood camshaft. Definitely sub 1,000 horsepower. Trying to run 6 O's in the 8th. The Gadget Man groove is a groove cut behind a throttle plate. And the engine set up for 24 to 28 psi. It's set up for 24 to 28 psi of boost. The results, more of the fuel is vaporized, more power, and often more fuel mileage. So I have a couple questions. One is, are you talking about boost in 28 to 28 psi? Also, a throttle blade. Are you talking about a throttle body, cutting a groove behind the throttle body? Because that will do nothing. It will do nothing for fuel vaporization, changing from a groove behind a throttle body in a throttle body situation like on an LS that's just flowing air. So maybe I don't understand exactly what you're talking about. I'm thinking about doing a YouTube channel. Did you say that you might have videos on 4-bolt to 3-bolt throttle bodies and differences in horsepower? Yes. The next time I go down, I'm going to run the 4-bolt Trailblazer SS with a stock 78 millimeter throttle body with an adapter, just to see. We'll run it at the 440 or 50 horsepower level to see if there's anything there. Because guys want to know, really their question is, if I get if I upgrade from a factory truck intake manifold, early truck manifold to a Trailblazer SS, do I also need to get the bigger throttle body? Guys that are doing drive-by-wire throttle bodies and can get one of those maybe from a wrecking yard, so that might be a possibility. But for the manual throttle body guys, which is what we'll test, and you could also do I guess, did they make drive-by-wire 3-bolt throttle bodies that were small? They just want to know at what power level the throttle body itself becomes a restriction, because a lot of guys would just like to put their throttle body back on with an adapter. You're going to have to buy an adapter, and that's something, but it's only $20 or something like that. I have a 496 with a scat crank, H-beams, dome piston. Is that good for 800 to 1,000 horsepower? Is the motor good for that? Like, can you run boost on it? Yeah, the rotating assembly will definitely take that. You do a small block Chevy boost episode with a Pro Charger. If you take a look at the videos that are already up, I already have run small block Chevys, lots of them, with Pro Chargers on them. C5 with drive-by-wire or 3-bolt. So was that a small throttle body then? That was a drive-by-wire, like 78 to 80 millimeter one? NA, you're not going to make 800 to 1,000 horsepower NA with a 496, or if you were going to, it'd be very, very difficult. A 496 making, forget about 1,000, but let's say 800. If you're going to try to make 800, it would be very, very high compression, really, really big cylinder heads, a giant size camshaft. It'd be probably a tunnel ram. It'd be all those things. And so that'd be expensive and difficult to do. Terry, it is a 78. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I want to run it and see at that power level. We'll also data log what the vacuum is, what the kPa change is, because we'll have a Holly on it. So we'll know if there's, hey, look, there's 2 kPa or no kPa or whatever the difference is we'll make a couple of runs with one of them, and then we'll log the kPa and go, yeah, it's going from this to this. I just want to make sure that it's repeatable, because if we see a difference of 2 kPa and I go, it's the difference is 2 kPa, but there's no change in power or whatever. We just want to be able to correlate those two. I have a tunnel ramp, yeah, but you're 800 horsepower with a 496 is really hard to do. So that's probably not going to happen. That's really hard to do. You got to have really, really big cylinder heads for that, and lots of camshaft and all kinds of stuff. It'd be a lot cheaper for you just to do it with boost. 1 more minute. One more minute. I've seen, in fact, I have one, and we've seen a couple different versions of, because guys are talking about the throttle bodies and grooves and stuff like that. I've seen throttle body spacers that have spirals in them, and just a spacer itself, and some that are like the one that I have tapers in and then tapers back out. I don't know why they're trying to do that. Quite honestly, that tapering in and tapering back out, I think is just going to be a restriction. Whatever is happening there, by the time it goes into, like, if you look at a truck manifold, if it seems to me that guys wouldn't be familiar with what a truck manifold is that are doing that for a truck manifold and trying to groove it or whatever they're trying to do. The airflow has to go into a common plenum and then has to turn left out of that common plenum and then go, it's in a tube basically, and then go into what is essentially the common plenum where all the runners come into, and then has to go to the side, that's where the opening is in this tube, and then go into the common plenum and then find its way into all the things. So if you think that any kind of turbulence that happens after the throttle body into that tube, if you think the turbulence stays consistent after going through there and then turning right and then dispersing into the common plenum, I don't see it. GM has a recall on the 6.2s. What is their deal with that? What are they recalling? What's the problem with them? Currently rebuilding a 327. Nice. Gasoline does not stay in a liquid state at 24 pounds of 24 pounds of vacuum? Do you mean 24 inches of vacuum? And a vortex is being introduced? A vortex can't be introduced in the throttle body in front of a in front of a an air only like truck manifold on an LS. Like as I just described, that's not going to happen. So I'm curious to see what he's talking about there. What exact instance? I'm thinking that he's talking about if it has 24 inches of vacuum, which would be something that you would have under a really hard decel. If you could create that situation, maybe he's getting some shearing or something of the fuel and he's changing the droplet size. But none of that's going to happen on a port injected deal like I'm talking about. So it has to be on some kind of throttle body injected thing where the fuel and the blade are in close proximity, or on a, like the it's not going to do it on a TPIS or the Crossfire setup where it's a dual throttle body injector thing. And on that note, it is time to go. You guys have a good Saturday night, and I will see you all tomorrow. Make sure to check out richardholdenerperformance.com for all your LS needs. Peace.